Twitter criticism. Let's read some Russian news. I avoided CGTN's Russian news, but now here we are, Russia Today. Yeah, I'm not going to read Obama Intel chief Russian gay dogs. I don't know why Russia Today thinks this is important. I think it is not. Trump says one in four chance Putin meeting will fail. But I'm going to read you what about Obama Intel chief. Declassified emails expose Obama Intel chief's role in Russian Gate hoax. And this is interesting. Look, the second one. Russia Today, August 14. World News. Trump says 1 in 4 chance Putin meeting will fail. The US president is set to discuss the Ukraine conflict with his Russian counterpart in Alaska on Friday. And there's a photograph. US President Donald Trump in the Oval Office, Washington, D.C., August 14. US President Donald Trump has estimated that his upcoming meeting with Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin has a 25% chance of failing. The summit, which will take place on Friday at Joint Base Elmendorf Richardson in Anchorage, Alaska, is expected to focus mainly on pursuing a settlement to the Ukraine conflict. When asked during an interview with Fox News Radio on Thursday whether the meeting has a chance of failing, Trump replied, "Yeah, 25%. Quote, this meeting sets up the second meeting, but there is a 25% chance that this meeting will not be a successful meeting," he said. The president said he hoped the talks will pave the way for a subsequent meeting between Putin and Ukraine's Vladimir Zelensky. A hypothetical second meeting will be, quote-unquote, extremely important, as it will likely be central to talks about making a peace deal involving land swaps, Trump added. Earlier this week, Trump hinted that any potential solution to the Ukraine conflict will involve territorial exchanges. Quote, there will be some land swapping going on, end quote, he said at a question and answer Q&A session in Washington on Monday. Moscow previously indicated that it had received an quote-unquote acceptable offer from Washington through U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff during his talks with Putin last week. Witkoff's visit was quote-unquote productive and laid the groundwork for the Alaska summit, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said on Thursday. Putin has said that the Trump administration is making quote-unquote quote, quite energetic and sincere efforts to stop the hostilities in Ukraine. Washington is also working to, quote, create the long-term conditions of peace between our countries and in Europe and in the world as a whole, end quote, the Russian president said at the meeting with senior officials on Thursday. That was the first. There's a huge article, Ocean, Ice and Empire, the Rise and Fall of Russian Alaska. This is gigantic. Definitely, this kind of article from Russia Today. Look, I'm just going to see the size. Ocean, Ice and Empire, the Rise and Fall of Russian Alaska. Forget about it. They are discussing Alaska, huh? Anyway, Kiev's European backers must put up or shut up. Kiev's European backers must put up or shut up. EU pledges to maintain Russian sanctions. These Kiev's European backers. I have my backer. It's a pitbull. August 14th, Home World News. Kiev's European backers must, quote unquote, put up or shut up, Besant. The EU and UK should, quote unquote, do their part if they want a say on the Ukraine conflict, the US Treasury Secretary has said. There's a file photo. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. Kiev's European backers should stop making demands on Washington and contribute more to the resolution of the Ukraine conflict. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has said President Donald Trump has a quote-unquote negotiating strategy ahead of the summit with his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin in Alaska on Friday, and what he needs is quote-unquote some coordination from the US, Bessent told Fox Business on Thursday. Trump held a virtual meeting with the leaders of Germany, Finland, France, the UK, Italy, Poland, and the EU. The EU, I'm sure, is Ursula von der Leyen, as well as Ukraine's Vladimir Zelensky ahead of his talks with Putin. Kiev's European backers sought to ensure the security interests of Ukraine and the EU are quote-unquote safeguarded in Alaska. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz told journalists following the event. The group put forth five quote-unquote key points they wanted Trump to follow during Friday's summit, according to Merz. Those included a demand for a ceasefire before any talks on a quote-unquote framework agreement, as well as quote-unquote robust security guarantees for Kiev. Quote, "It is time for our European counterparts to put up or shut up," Bessent said. Commenting on the situation, quote, "They keep saying the US should do this, the US should do that." Quote, "If we are going to have a unified front, then I think that our European counterparts need to do their part," the Treasury Secretary said, pointing to the US secondary tariffs on India, a major importer of Russian oil. The EU did not follow Washington's example in this regard, Bessent said, noting that European companies are still buying Indian petroleum products. The US hiked tariffs on Indian goods up to 50% this month, citing the country's continued purchases of Russian oil. New Delhi has called the tariffs, quote, "unfair, unjustified, and unreasonable," and has vowed to protect its national interests. The EU and some of its member states have emerged as more hawkish supporters of Kiev since the US shifted towards a more diplomatic approach to resolving the Ukraine conflict under Trump. The Trump administration and Brussels have also engaged in mutual recriminations over how the burden of propping up Kiev should be shared. There was a Putin-Trump Alaska summit, and they have a photograph. Let's watch this. Now, this is an old photo from 2018. 2018 Alaska summit. I don't care about Alaska, you know. Not going to go back. Russia is interesting, but I'm not going to live there neither. It's just too cold. I prefer Hainan instead. Tara Reid, without Zelensky, peace has a chance. No, just one second. Highway to peace or to next war? It says August 14, highway to peace or to the next war. 43 kilometers stretch through Syunik is set to connect Azerbaijan to Nakhchivan. What it might really connect it is a chain of geopolitical fault lines. And there's a photograph from Azerbaijan and Armenia. When Armenia and Azerbaijan, I don't care. No, I don't care. I just want to know about bigger wars. Not. UK discloses serious nuclear incident at Navy base. I guess that much is it. U.S. efforts to settle Ukraine conflict and energetic and sincere. Putin. August 14. Home. Russia and former Soviet Union. U.S. efforts to settle Ukraine conflict, quote unquote, energetic and sincere. Putin. The Russian president is set to meet with his American counterpart Donald Trump in Alaska to discuss resolving the Ukraine conflict. And there's a photograph. Russian President Vladimir Putin. The U.S. is making a genuine effort to stop the fighting in Ukraine and reach agreements that will account for the interests of all parties involved, Russian President Vladimir Putin has said. Putin is scheduled to meet with U.S. President Donald Trump on Friday in Anchorage, Alaska, to discuss ways of ending the Ukraine conflict. Oh, now I got it. They are not discussing Alaska itself. There will be a meeting in Alaska to discuss ways of ending the Ukraine conflict, as well as steps toward normalizing relations between Moscow and Washington. On Thursday, Putin met with top government officials in Moscow to discuss the upcoming summit and, quote, the stage where we are with the current U.S. administration, end quote. He said that the American leadership is making, quote, quite an energetic and sincere efforts to stop the hostilities and working to, quote, create long-term conditions of peace between our countries and in Europe and in the world as a whole, end quote. Putin added that this process could be further advanced in Russia if Russia and the US reach agreements on strategic offensive weapons control in the next stages of negotiations. Among the officials present at Thursday's meeting were Defense Minister Antov Silvanov and Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, all of whom will be traveling to Alaska on Friday to take part in the Putin-Trump summit. According to the Kremlin, the event will begin with a one-on-one conversation between the two leaders, followed by a meeting on the Russian and US delegations. Trump has described the summit as a quote-unquote fill-out meeting that will help him determine whether the Ukraine conflict can be resolved. He has said that if the talks go well, he may seek a second round of negotiations involving Putin and Ukrainian leader Vladimir Zelensky. White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt said on Thursday that Trump will pursue all possible options for a peaceful end to the conflict during his meeting with Putin. She added that the US president would prefer not to impose any new sanctions on Russia, but instead resolve the situation through diplomacy. And there was a part in all these discourses that trying to make peace in the whole world, bullshit. This is empty words. Anyway, so Alaska will remain American territory, and I don't know what else to say. This stupid war is making Russia rich. American empire will collapse. I want to live in Hainan, China. Eventually, visiting Russia. Why not?